Hi, this is Brad. This is the Agile Uprising podcast, and we're working our way through the 12 days of Agile. Congratulations, we're almost all the way through. We're at the penultimate level of the podcast, the self-organizing teams, principle number 11. Now, this was an absolutely great conversation for me to come back to because it's still very, very timely, and it still is all about finding the right balance between self-organizing and how we create self-organizing teams. Now, one of the things that I've always noted over the years is that for self-organizing to work, there needs to be some bumper lanes, but there also needs to be other preconditions which our host really explore well. When it comes to self-organizing, the one big thing that is taken away by all the hosts is that trust is the center of everything. So what we're doing is when we're letting teams self-organize, we're saying that we understand that the people that are creating the work understand the work and understand what needs to be done, and that by trusting them, we're going to get the best outcomes. We're looking at emergent behavior, we're looking at emergent design, and really finding the way forward that works best for everybody and all concerned. That in order to minimize waste, the teams will need to be able to avoid handoffs. And this is where creating things and self-organizing and figuring out the way to go forward is so important. It was a great episode. Sit back, relax, and really enjoy the show.
This is Heidi Helfand. You're listening to the Agile Uprising podcast.
On the 11th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me
11 pipers piping,
10 lords a leaping,
5 ladies dancing,
8 maids a milking, 7 swans a swimming,
6 geese a laying,
5 golden rings,
4 calling boys,
3 French and
2 turtle doves,
and a partridge in a pear tree.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I am your MC, Paul Elia, and I have with me Colleen Johnson and
Hello.
Andy Clough.
Hi there.
And this is our Christmas special, the Agile Manifesto 12 Principles series, and we're coming at you with principle number 11. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. Colleen, I'm going to start with you. What does this bring for you?
I think that when I think of self-organizing teams having the ability to put their best design, architecture, and requirements forward, that means making sure that they're involved from the very beginning. And this can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different organizations. When I think of that, I think of story mapping and getting involved in having that really cohesive, big picture vision of where we're headed with the overall initiative or project. I think it can be hard when we're only looking at the individual stories or the individual sprint goals to keep our eye on that big picture. And it's really important for the team to start there so that they can come up with the best architectures, requirements, and designs.
I want to yes and all of that. I like to look at it and unpack it and talk about emergence. Colleen, you touched on bringing the team in up front, and that's so elegant because we really don't know what we don't know. And breaking it down into stories that are just a hint of what we might do focuses light on that emergence. The other two pieces that I think are really critical are self-organizing. To me, that means there's a collective ownership by all the team members. They have all the skills necessary to take those ideas and actually produce an increment that's shippable. And the last piece is the team. If you look at any of the guides, it's at least 2 people, and it could be more. It could be 2 pizza teams. It could be a full release train. But they are working together with the goal of building something valuable for their customers. Put it all together.
Absolutely.
Teams, self-organizing emergence, you get the best solution.
And I think some of that even starts, we're talking about where you kind of start in the overall process here, but I think that can also come from bringing a problem to that team. So they do get that chance to be creative and, collaborate on coming to a solution for the problem together rather than just looking at individual requirements. And I'm seeing a lot of teams and a lot of organizations really focusing on moving product more into that strategy type of role, where they're really understanding what their customers need and what their users' problems are, so that they can bring that problem to the team to solve, rather than just bringing them those individual user
Hey, Paul,
stories.
can we flip this back to you and turn the clock back on how it used to be before Principle 11 was there? How did, you and I both have enough gray hair
Oh, geez. You want me
that
to
we
go
remember.
back in the way back internet time machine? Hell, I predate what we call the internet. I started in the mainframe era. We used to be T-shaped from the beginning. We didn't specialize. I went to work for a company that did mainframe, Fortran. We actually did expert system type stuff. And believe it or not, I did AI. We didn't have this specialization like we went through like the 15 years later. It's kind of like the pendulum is now swinging back to wanting T-shaped people. We didn't call them that. I don't know where the hell that term came from. Don't care. I like the idea of it. I like pie-shaped people. So self-organizing is kind of what we did. And maybe I was lucky. Maybe I got a great start because the team that I work with did pair programming, code reviews, regression tests that ran every day. But there wasn't any one of us that had the role of QA or DBA or Paul's the AI guy. I showed other people how to do what I did. So it was a cool environment to start in. And then what I think I witnessed 15 years later is we got really specialized to the point where I'm in an environment now where there are so many areas of specialization at the company. It has to be a scaled, agile flavor of some sort or another just to accommodate where we are today. It actually was better when I started.
In the way back, right?
In the way back.
I think some of the intention or the backstory behind this principle is that middle ground that you talked about, where there were specialists. There were the DBAs, the designers, the testers, the analysts.
Architects.
And the architects. These people, they were likely high paid and split over many projects.
Right.
And they would hand stuff off.
Handoffs, exactly. Handoffs. And very expensive people, typically, right? The more specialized you got. I'm not saying that a good generalist isn't expensive, but there aren't any handoffs.
Well,
right? Or it's a lot of paired work.
And our goal with, I think Kanban tends to be in the spotlight when we talk about minimizing multitasking, but that's a lot of what we're trying to do with these self-organizing and cross-functional teams is make it so there aren't long running handoffs between teams or bottlenecks between those teams, so that that whole team can be focused together on that deliverable. And I think, that should be a goal for all of our teams, that we're not, we don't have members that are off on different tangents, because then they are inherently multitasking against whatever our sprint objective is.
And we've proven the math is there. Multitasking, no good for anybody. Anybody that says that the job descriptions, you've all read them, must be good at multitasking. Really? Okay. So
Yeah,
you're saying it's all messed up.
The other problem that a lot of us saw was those specialists sort of flew in, gave the requirements, and flew out.
Oh, God. And I was one of those people, and I hated it. Because those designs, because of all the handoffs and delays, they didn't always come to life. Because the market window closed before they could be executed.
Yeah.
And as an engineer, that sucks. That feeling of that, all that problem solving, those late nights of solving, solutioning on something like this. And oops, sorry, time's up, money's out. We're on to do something else now. Oh.
So you couldn't move quickly.
We couldn't move quick enough.
But we all got really good at ping pong.
Were you able to provide sufficient information that people could take what you, quote, specified and then run with it? Or is that the ping pong you're referring to?
We did write down what it was that we intended to do. It was not the RUP era. That came later. That came maybe not even quite 10 years after I started. It wasn't far after I started. That's when all the paper came into play. But where I started, the company was 20 years old when I started. So they were a bunch of power system engineers who knew how to write Fortran. There were some COBOL guys in there too for some of the reporting stuff. But we specialized on small teams that took care of particular product lines. We were product-focused, T-shaped teams. I really reflected on that. I've reflected on it my entire career. I really need to put a talk together on just that experience, because I think people think mainframe and people that were working 3 decades ago, they must have done it wrong. We actually did it really well. And we got lost along the way, in my opinion. And I think what the manifesto was for me in 2001, for somebody that was up to his eyeballs in paperwork for RUP, it was like the Declaration of Independence for software engineers. Like, hell yes, you guys are making sense. Let's stop all that insanity.
Did it free up your experimenting bones?
Well, what I was doing before Snowbird was I thought I invented Spiral. I've told this story before on the podcast, so I'm not going to go deep on it, but turns out somebody else had come up with that term, and it was very similar. But I was already doing iterative development. I'd already learned the hard way that if you don't show users, customers, what you have in mind before you do it, and then if that's not good enough for them, it's too abstract, show them something that works, but it's not everything. Like it might not have all the test cases worked out, it's happy path, but you at least show them what the heck you got. If you don't do that frequently enough, you're liable to go down a rabbit hole. And I've rescued a lot of projects in my career where they were oblivious to the fact that they were never going to complete.
That comes back to the emergence principle, allowing the team to experiment, to learn, to demo, to have the power to iterate, to figure out what works, what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Well, why don't you guys, so you keep asking about my way in the past experiences, and Andy, you've actually got me by a few years. Why don't you? Hey, you make me feel great. I'm not the oldest person in the gang, so
For
why
me,
don't you tell me about an early experience?
For me, what's emerged over the years is the element of trust, where we've moved away from, as you described it, Rob, command and control. Here's what you're going to build. Here's the specifications. When you're done, we will come test it. We've let go of that illusion that we know exactly what we need, because the best results emerge. And so without the element of trust in the team to come up with the best results, you're forced to produce what the specifications recalled for when you knew as little as you knew so little at the very beginning that that there's an element of absurdity there.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys have gotten this, the misinterpretation of Agile. I actually got a little grumpy with somebody that seriously outranks me recently, like C-suite, asking for dates on something before I had approved people to join the initiative. And I'm like, at least back in waterfall days, I knew how many resources I'd have, and I would have done a work breakdown structure and a Gantt chart before I was asked to answer that question. But if I must, I will guess with you right here and now, not knowing very much at all about what it is that we're going to do here without the people being assured.
I think we should all carry
misinterpretation. Don't you Agile guys not need to do that kind of stuff anymore?
I keep a couple of set of dice in my pocket for that instance. When are we going to be done?
Dungeons and Dragon, like hugely multifaceted dice.
Exactly. There you go. What does that mean? Anything you like, you tell me.
Colleen, this self-organizing aspect is really interesting to me, and I know you've done scaled as well as team size. But I think in the larger organizations, we have to scale if we're going to meet the organization the way it's structured at the time we come upon them. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I would even say one of the things that I tend to run into pretty frequently with organizations where you are joining an effort mid-project, that I find kind of a repeated broken habit is that even when we think we're doing Scrum really well, Whether you call them epics or initiatives or features, whatever your group of stories is. I know that's got to be one of the most heavily contested words in Agile. I tend to use epic for a group of stories that deliver user value. But what we see a lot is that those epics get defined and then we add stories to them. And they end up being very linear in fashion where Epic 1 has to be built before Epic 2 and then Epic 3.
Right.
And I think that's another place where having the team really help carve up that work in a way that makes sense for how they're building it and is connected to how they can deliver customer value incrementally is super important. And when we fail on that step, then it makes it really hard for the team to be successful, no matter how great they're running their Scrum practices at the team level, because the work just isn't broken down in a way that they can be successfully delivering value each time. And our goal is that, that they're helping break that work down as a team, right? So we were talking about having that really kind of a collective understanding about everything that's required to deliver as a group. That starts with having the team really flesh out those requirements together rather than being handed that big requirements document, right? Like I think we've all experienced that pain.
There's a great quote I'm reminded of by General Patton. Never tell people how to do things. Tell them what you want, and they'll surprise you with their ingenuity. You don't tell them, go take that hill by walking 10 paces left, 12 paces right, dig in. You tell them the goal. We want to produce this thing for this customer with this sort of value. When you break it down into these epics that you were talking about, you reduce their ingenuity capability.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great quote for that.
I like that we have in the community started talking more and more about Agile outside of software. The manifesto does have its roots in software, and I'm a software guy. But I do like that we're talking about more than that with Agile. And so if we take the 11th principle, rather, tweak it a little bit, we could say the best stuff or the best results emerge from self-organizing teams.
Absolutely.
We don't have to talk about architecture requirements, designs, and maybe we shouldn't talk about things like that because it implies that we want those artifacts in some kind of sequence. At least it does to me, because I've seen it go in a sequence before. I'd rather say the best results emerge from self-organizing.
It's almost like the concepts we're seeing with the whole escape room thing that you can go do. I've never done one, but I've worked with teams that have done them for team building, and I've heard so many groups say that the minute you stop working together, like you fail. And one of the teams I'm coaching right now actually had to be let out. Like they never got out of the room on their own. And that's what they said. They said, we just stopped working together and stopped communicating. Everybody was doing their own thing. And I think that's a great example of what you're talking about, Paul, that this extends into, lots of areas where we're trying to problem solve and deliver a solution as a team.
Exactly.
I highly recommend the escape rooms. By the way, we did one recently, and it's the only one I've ever done. We did fail, but we did not fail for lack of teamwork. We missed a black Heideke box in a black stove, and without that key, we weren't going to get anywhere. And they give you hints on a television screen in the one that we do, but it just wasn't enough. We couldn't find it. But it was not for lack of teamwork. Our teamwork was producing extraordinary results. And this was like, if we had had 5 more minutes and we could have found that one key, we could have done it. But I loved the teamwork that came out of that. There were people that I'm going to admit that I had judged from other things. And then when I saw their creative problem solving skills in a game, I had a whole new relationship with them the next day.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's not the best architectures, designs, requirements emerge from a bunch of people working in the same room independently.
Right.
It's that team. It's at least 2 people, and you could pair off and escape the room. But you're working together in order to create something that's valuable, i.e., get out of the room in record time. I want to go back to what you talked about, Paul, is the concept that perhaps this principle, architectures, requirements, design, leads people into thinking there's that sequence.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I think it's important to note that the values were produced face-to-face collaboration. There was alignment to come to something very short and sweet that stood the test of time. The principles were done via email exchange, not face-to-face, and probably not through the technology that we enjoy today, webcams and stuff like that, right? Odds are it was just email. That was the gist that I got from reading and listening to the Agile Uprising interviews that are quite recent with these fellows. That's going to produce a different result, I think, than face-to-face collaboration.
I agree. I wouldn't go down the path of rewriting it. That's not our mission.
No, I think we all have agreed. They agreed. That's something I tip my hat to the 17 is they've stood by. Occasional creak and slip here in recent years. I've seen a few, but social media is an unforgiving thing sometimes. But by and large, they've stuck by. We wouldn't have it any other way. We wouldn't rewrite it. Everybody was involved. Everybody participated equally. And that's good team attitude, right?
Yeah, it's good enough for now. Read between the lines, read between the words. Sometimes it's those spaces. And again, it comes back to trust your team to read this, understand the intent, and let them run with
Definitely.
it. We're working with smart people. Point to the 12 principles. This is number 11, and let them figure out what it means to them.
If there is an executive out there that happens to pick up our podcast, right, or a listener that shares it, getting to the point of trusting your people is so important. It's what this is about, right? Take away the software aspects of it. Trust your people to work together. This is the kind of work. We use the word emerge here in this principle. This isn't paint a house or do work in an auto shop, even though I think that's a little harder. It does require some complex problem solving skills. But paint a house or do some landscaping or something like that is mostly labor. There's a way to do it. And it probably has a certain expectation of how quickly one could do that work if they were being careful and diligent and doing a quality job. Knowledge work isn't that.
Absolutely.
Right? And expecting people to come up with dates on scant information and to march and jump on command just isn't going to produce the results. The best results emerge from trusting your teams and letting them do like you would do in an escape room, problem solve together.
Yeah, it's always fascinated me how much organizations spend on recruiting and hiring smart engineers, right? We put so much energy into that process for a great reason. And a lot of it comes down to company culture and building these high performing teams. And then we get them all together and then tell them exactly what to do, which is really unfortunate. And it's not just from not just from a coming up with the best solution perspective, but also keeping people happy and engaged with what they're doing, right? Nobody wants to stick around for that role. So you end up losing super intelligent engineers that you spent all this time to hire because we're not giving them the space to be creative and come up with those solutions as a group.
It's horrible. It doesn't do anything for retention. What's that Steve Jobs quote? Don't hire smart people and then tell them what to do. Hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. That emerges right from this principle, right?
Yep.
Build self-organizing teams, trust them, and be amazed by what emerges.
And allow it to be emergent. The boss that I have today, he repeats, like he's trying to teach by repetition. We plan to have a plan, but I don't really care about the plan. I care that you do the planning. And he totally gets the emergent nature of things. If 2 days from now we have a new insight because we ran an experiment or we went and validated something, and you want to change your mind about something you thought 2 days earlier, great, good job. That's not what you said 2 days ago. And that's a super, super great attitude to have if you understand that this work is complex and we're not doing work that has been done before and there's a labor chart that goes with it.
Exactly. It even gets worse. In the old days. It was, what you thought you wanted 2 months ago, and now you've switched context 27 times, and we're asking you questions about what you meant then.
Oh yeah, it's Rain Man. Shut up. He's answering a question we asked 15 minutes ago. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, the good that's come from the manifesto and the principles is undeniable. Glad to have had them. I do say my coaching for all of them, not just this one. I do think we want to close soon here and close on what we'd like to leave people with on this one principle. But for me overall, understand their history. I can't recommend enough. The reason I am involved in this great group, Agile Uprising, is because of the Agile Manifesto signatory series. I can't recommend it enough. You're going to hear straight from, so far, 14 out of the 17 folks that got together and put this work together, what they were thinking back then. And understand the history. Don't just read this stuff and try to understand it on your own. The people that came up with it have spoken, and you get the opportunity to hear that at agileuprising.com. So check that out, and then start thinking for yourself, right? But do understand where it came from.
Beautiful.
Andy, what about you?
Well, we're starting a tradition, or, we're going to rewrite the song. We're not going to rewrite the principles. But on the 11th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 11 pipers piping. Colleen, on the 11th day of Agile, what did your coach give to you?
Autonomy and trust. Mm-hmm. I think I was joking before we started that it's allowing everyone to pipe up rather than piping. But I think that's a big part of it, right? Giving everybody that opportunity to have a voice in this design process and discovery process before work begins.
I love that. Piping up. Hey, Paul.
Yeah. So to distill again, I just love the attitude my boss Brian has right now about planning, and I wish that everyone out there could get that kind of support, that do the planning, do the thinking that comes with that planning. But don't beat people over the head about the plan if you have better information later and change your mind. That's exactly what you should do. So if I could give a listener that, it's expect that from your team, and if your role is that you can give it to your team, do so.
Love it. For me, on the 11th day of Agile, Agile gave to me, I first wrote 11 coders coding, but that's not a fully cross-functional team. That's too focused. It gave me 11 cool people collaborating. How's that?
Yeah.
I'd sing it, but I'm
love it.
deaf.
Yeah, that's it. No, really cool. Andy, you've probably got our information for listeners. I just blabbed it out kind of briefly, but we got Twitter and stuff like that. Why don't you close this out?
Sure. Thank you all for tuning in to this 11th episode of the 12 Days of Agile. If you thoroughly enjoyed this episode as much as Paul, Colleen, and myself, give us a review, a rating, or leave some comments on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever podcasting platform you're using. Doing so really helps others find us. If this is your first time tuning in, listen to the 11. Stay tuned for the 12th. Subscribe. You'll get an update, typically once a week. And if you'd like to join our discussion, share your stories around Agile, mindfulness, craft beer, whatever tickles your fancy, join us on coalition.agileuprising.com. Until next time, this is the Agile Uprising Podcast, signing out.